Hello there. I'm just, again, still new to this new platform that we're using to stream Facebook and on YouTube. So thank you for leaving a comment to say hi, just so I confirm that I'm doing everything correct over here. So today we have some new products that I'm going to be sharing with you. There was an amazing blog hop that went live this morning, and it features some of these new products. And for all of you watercolor fans out there, you're going to love this. And Tasneem and I love watercoloring, as do most of the girls on the Altenew team. So it was important for us to continue to release products to make your life of watercoloring fun, simplified, really enjoyable. So if you already know, we do have some watercolor products in the Altenew shop that we've had for a few years, and I'll go over them shortly. But we also have some new additions. Like I said, I think you like them, and I'm excited to share them today. So while we're live, definitely share this video, and that will give you an opportunity to win a $15 gift certificate to the Altenew shop. And it'll let your friends know that you're watching. Maybe they're crafters too, and they want to come in and join us as well. Now, today's going to be a little bit different for me because usually I try to finish at least one project. I tend to go over on my time or run out of time to finish something, but I at least try to get one done. So even if I plan 2 projects, 3 projects, we at least finish one and maybe get bits and pieces of another one finished. But for today instead, I'm probably not going to finish because when I'm doing the watercoloring today, it's probably going to take me a little bit more time. I was trying to consider to do a loose watercolor, or do I want to do a more detailed watercolor? And I decided I'm going to do something in between. So it's an easy technique. Maybe you've seen it before, and it's not going to take too much skill to pull off, but it does take some time. So we're just going to be chatting and painting and having a nice relaxing day. Today it's an afternoon for me right now, so you might be just waking up, or it might be evening time for you, but we're just going to chill and hang out, and whatever gets done, and then I can always go back and finish off screen. I also have kind of like an odd mix of like casual and not casual today, so I didn't feel like getting dressed up, so I went with one of my favorites, cozy Altenew sweatshirt. But I did feel like playing with some makeup today because Lydia's makeup game for live has been on point. I have to say, I feel like I need to step it up at these really cool like eyeshadows going on. So I got some new eyeshadow, actually. I know this has nothing to do with crafting, but I'm just waiting for people to hop in. So thank you for hearing me out. But it was a collaboration between the brand ColourPop and with Animal Crossing. And I love Animal Crossing, so I just had to get it. So I went ahead and played with makeup, but yeah, I didn't get dressed up. So it's kind of a halfway in between. And our project today is going to be in between simple and difficult. So I think it's just a whole theme we've got going on here. So thank you to Tracy for sharing the video. And let's see who else shared. Few other girls, thank you. And Brianna, thank you. And Teresa says she's stunned by the hop. So many beautiful cards. So Teresa, I'm with you there 100%. These projects in the blog hop are amazing. So let me talk about the product, the new feature for today. And it is our watercolor coloring book. Let me get that better in the frame for you here. So like I said, this was going to be something that we would hope to make things easier for you. So the process when most people create a watercolor card is they would do some stamping for an ink, like the permanent black ink, because then it won't react with water. If you want to have it look like elements are overlapping each other, you would do some masking and stamping, and it's fun. We all love stamping, and I love it too. But sometimes you just want to like jump right into the watercoloring. So we have this watercolor coloring book, which is kind of like a 2-purpose, maybe even 3-purpose idea. The first idea is practice. Okay, if you're new to watercoloring and you're not really sure where to start, and you just want to get right to the coloring, as I said earlier, just get right to painting. and have some lovely arrangements of flowers already done for you. It's just like any other coloring book. So if you were practicing with colored pencils, you might use a regular coloring book, and this one is for watercolor. So this is printed on 100% cotton cold press watercolor paper, and these are 5x7 sheets. So we purposefully made them a little bit larger than a base, and that is so you can either just use them as a book and flip through and practice your painting, or you can painting and then pull out the sheet. So they do rip cleanly out here, and then you can frame it in a 5x7 frame if you make some lovely artwork. And lastly, you can cut it down to size to fit onto an A2 size card, and that's another way to use this. So really, those are the 3 ways that we were thinking, but you could probably come up with many ways to use this. And what I think is so amazing about this design of the coloring book is that each design is printed twice. So the first time it's printed in black. Okay, so you can see that. And these designs, a lot of them or all of them come from our stamp designs. And let's see if you can see what's going on here. So the second one is the same design, but printed in a really light gray tone. I'm trying to move it around so that you guys can see the design. I know it's really tough to see, but that was on purpose. So the point for that is so that you can make a no line watercolor look. So if you want to fool your friends and family and make them think that you drew that by hand and then colored it in, they will never know the difference, because that gray color is just kind of going to fade away as you paint on top of it. So the lines are easy to see in person, but they are still faint. That way, like I said, it'll give you that no line colored look. And it is watercolor paper, but of course you're not limited to just using watercolor supplies. You can use other color mediums because it is a nice heavyweight paper. And let me just flip through some of these. I'm doing terrible with the camera. I'm sorry. I keep forgetting that it's not mirrored. So when I want to go to the left, I have to go to the right. So I'm sorry that I just feel like I'm a little disjointed here. So we have 12 beautiful designs. And if you do check out the blog hop, you can see how a lot of our designers have used these. So you can see it's really inspirational arrangements of flowers. You know, at Altenew, we love florals. We can't get enough. So of course we want to do some flowers. So since there are 12 designs and you have the black and the grayscale, then you're going to end up with 24 sheets. And let me continue on to the last few here so you can see. And I just want to make sure to show all the designs to you so that if you feel like this is a product you are interested in, then you know exactly what you are getting. And I believe we have one more right over here. Okay, so those are the designs. And today I'm going to be using these along with our first watercolor set that we released. It is a favorite of mine. I guess I can't say that because they're all favorites of mine. I think the last Facebook Live I said the watercolor brush markers were a favorite of mine. I'm not trying to like pull a fast one on you. They really are all my favorite for different reasons. So for this one, I'm just using the pan set, and I do have happening here on the palette. And I did want to show this to you just because this is reality here. You can definitely clean your palette off in painting sessions. I don't, just because that's usable paint. Why am I going to waste what I already have on the palette? And anytime I want a clean area of a palette to use, I will just wet it. I could use a spray bottle, or I could just wet a piece of paper towel and then wipe it down. So that's a way that I like to just keep things clean when needed. But otherwise, like my palette always looks like this. And then when I'm done painting, I just close it up and it's there for me for next time. So definitely let me know if you're into painting, if you're into watercoloring. It's something that I've loved doing for a long time. And I'm happy that the card world is into it now too. I'm saying now into it. It's been into it for years, but it's just cool to have the fine arts and the crafting community melding into one for these types of projects. So let me flip over to my other camera so you can see what I'm working on. And the other thing I'm going to show you, but I'll do it when we're down so you could see better, is that we have two different watercolor brush sets, and one of them is a detail set and the other one has a variety of sizes. So when I pop you down, you should be able to see that a little bit more easily, and then I'll talk to you about those. Okay, so let me just flip this down. Need to, oh yeah, there we go. Just kind of adjust this a tad. We're a little crooked here. Okay, and Penny said she's good with loose watercoloring, but not with the no line. The no line is more challenging, and I would recommend watching some of the videos that we have on our YouTube channel, just because you can see how the designers add a lot of depth, and I think that's what helps pull off the no line watercolor look. You have to have a lot of contrast between your shadows and your highlights. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to see. Sorry, we got a little bit of a highlight there, glare. I think that's better. So this is the larger size. And we have a variety of brushes here. And these are all thick brushes, but they are mimicking or synthetic sable brushes. And the other set is synthetic squirrel hair brushes. So they are wonderful quality brushes at a good price point. And you can see when you get it, it comes in this case, and you have these little protector caps on the smaller sized brushes. And we have a size 1. This one is the size 3. So you can see that there. This next one is a large brush. This is size 8. This is great for doing background washes. So if you want to apply a lot of water or you want to apply a lot of paint, you would definitely want to go for a large brush like this. I love how these look too. We spent a lot of time designing the brushes, and we definitely wanted them to have an Altenew feel. So we're like, we need to do sleek black. We wanted the metal part to be black for these. They look great with the hair on the brush is black as well. And then we have the gold dip on the handle. So I think that's a really classy set. So this is number 4. And then over here is the number 2 brush. Now this is a new brush set. I have my other had used earlier, a sample, but I wanted to show you that when you first get it, the brush tips are stiff. Okay, so there is some residue from when they are manufactured and shaped, and there's a little bit of a stiffness to this. And what you're going to want to do is rinse that out, and it's going to soften the hairs of the brush. That Anne mentioned the case. Yeah, the case is awesome. And not only does the case protect your brushes, but it also has this like little string here. Let's see if I can get you to see this a little bit better. This part would have probably been better to show you on the other camera. But if I take this little string and pull it, and there's a little toggle guy on the end, I can tighten that up, and then I can get this to stand up on. So you can use it as a brush stand and a brush case. So as you're working, it's just standing here, and I could pull out my brushes and use them like this. And when I'm finished, I would loosen up my little toggle, and then I can close it up. So then the other set are in detail brushes. Okay, so again, these will come with the caps to protect the brushes. And we have a size 0 brush. So now we're getting to these teeny tiny ones. Very fine details for your painting. The next is size 1. And over here I have size 2 and then size 3. So I'll pull them out to show you too. Okay, so there's two. These are all smaller brushes, and these brushes also have this like ergonomic design to them, because we know that when you're painting, you can definitely experience hand for holding a smaller brush. So this just makes it a lot easier. You have a little surface to rest your thumb on, depending on how you hold your brushes. If you hold like this, or this is how I usually hold my brushes, you just have that little area there, which makes it a lot more comfortable to hold for extended periods of time, especially. So we wanted these fine brushes to have that feature. Okay, and then here is the number 3 brush. So those are all teeny tiny little brushes. I would say that maybe my favorite of this set is number 2, because I feel like it's good in between size. I can still apply a lot of color with them. I can still do detailed areas with them. So I'll probably be focusing mostly on this brush, but I will do some with the other brushes too. Now, for those of you just joining us, because I know I just gave a huge on all of this, we have some new products that we've added to the Altenew store, and that includes the brushes I just shared along with this fabulous watercolor coloring book. And instead of doing a regular card project today, I'm just going to do some painting. Now I'm trying to think of which design I want to go for. I am quite inspired by all of these. Some of them I did already paint on another project. And I'm actually just going to keep the book while I paint. Okay, so again, you can pull it out. If you have a surface you like to paint on, you can definitely use that surface. So we have in the Altenew shop a watercolor palette. They're just plain plastic palettes. They're great for mixing. I also sometimes just take on the larger palette some painter's tape and go around the outer edge and just paint down or apply on that. I've also used a, what is it called? A clipboard. And then I will all around the edge to hold it flat. But for now, I'm not going to be applying a lot of water. I'm not doing huge washes, so I'm not too concerned about having warping. Okay, so I'm just going to paint from it as if it was just a regular coloring book, right? If you color in your coloring book, you don't necessarily pull out the pages as you work on them. All right, so I do have over here just some water that I'll be using. And just a heads up, if you are new to watercolor painting, one thing you don't want to do with nice brushes is you do not want to store your brushes in your water. So as you're painting and you're done with one brush and you want to pick up another brush, you can put it back into the case. So if you're using the case as a stand, you could just slip it in and grab another color. Although sometimes I just leave it out, I'm just being honest, and I'll just keep them on my desk or table, wherever I'm working, and then I have them at the ready, because you can damage the bristles if you store upside down. And the other thing is you want to make sure you're not using warm or hot water, because that could affect the glue that's holding the bristles into the brush handle. Okay, so again, if you have if you have shared this video while we're live, then you are entered to win a $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. And the technique I'm going to be using, not too hard, not too easy. It's like a nice in-between technique for painting flowers. So I'm going to start one petal at a time. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want the colors to bleed from one petal to the next. And I'm just starting by applying some water to that. Let me bring you in a little bit closer. Okay, so now I'm just wetting it just so that my paint has a way to move on the watercolor paper as I am painting. And again, these colors here have been there since my last painting session. So I'm just going to grab right off of that palette. And once you put some water to it, it will reactivate that color. So I'm thinking I'll go with yellow near the tips of the petals. And I'll do some reddish tones towards the base. Now, is there a flower that has red and yellow petals? I don't know. Doesn't matter. And you can see as I'm painting, the yellow is blending with the red that I'm putting down. And that's because that petal was wet. And that continues to blend more seamlessly as it dries. If you want to encourage it along, you can also just take a wet brush. So I just rinse it off a little bit, and I can just mix those colors a little bit more to my content. So if I wanted the red to come up a little bit higher up here, maybe as variation, I can do that. And then if I want to add a little more saturation down towards the bottom, I'm going to grab some color right from the pan itself, just so I can really load up that brush and put some more intensity down towards the bottom. Okay, and I'm just going to keep going around with the water, blending things, and just focusing on this one petal. I just added a little bit more water than I wanted. So I do have some paper towel here. Always have paper towels handy while you're painting. It's very, very important. And I'm just going to lift up some of that here. Okay, I didn't want it to be as dark. And I'll bring that back up. And there we go. I've got a nice softly painted petal. Now, since these petals aren't really overlapping, I can go to the next petal down the line. I was painting the rose. I wouldn't want to paint this followed by this one, because then there's going to be blending as that dries. But since this is completely separated from that first one, I am free to go ahead and do that. I'm seeing the colors are looking a little weird on camera. I'm hoping that's not due to my lighting. It's looking like a little neon down here. I promise you, it is just regular red. It is not a neon tone. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to wet my petal. And I'm just going to continue around. Now, like I said, you need some patience for this technique, just because you are going one petal at a time. You're using a small brush. You are taking your time with your painting, but it's really relaxing. It is so nice. And this is going to give you a really smooth result. So these petals won't look realistic, because if you think of an actual flower petal, there is so much variation to it. So there are creases, there are areas that might not be as vibrant as the part next to it. There could be some veining, different things like that. But, you know, we're just doing a basic painting here. Just showing you how you can use this coloring book to, you know, relieve some stress from your day, or just practice different techniques. I'm going to move over to this one and applying my water once more. And I really enjoy making colors or making petals or whatever, painting petals that wouldn't necessarily exist in nature. Because when you're doing layered stamping, you it depends. All right, I can't say that this is a rule, because I've definitely broken this rule too. But a lot of times when you're doing layered stamping, you want to have the same color family. And the reason for that is because you don't want to get a muddy mess. So if you're using dye inks, they're going to sink into the paper, and then that color is going to activate a little bit. It'll react slightly with the other colors that you add on top, because they're kind of transparent or translucent colors when you do ink like that. So if you were doing a layered stamping, you want to keep similar color range. You know, you don't want to go with opposite colors on the color wheel, because then you might end up with brown. But when you're painting, if you're careful with where you're placing the color and which colors are blending with which, you could have a rainbow petal if you want. You know, you could just go in and add as many colors as you desire. And the other thing that's nice about painting like this is I'm not too worried about keeping every petal looking the same, because I think that'll make it look more natural. And the water just kind of does its thing. You can't completely predict exactly what it's going to look like. So it's kind of fun just seeing what you end up with at the end. So I'm just adding some more of that red. I'm thinking I want to do something fun in the center. Maybe like a purple. So we're really going wild with this one, with colors that you probably wouldn't find on the same flower. but that's part of the joy of it. Okay, now that first petal that I painted is pretty much completely dry. And you may have noticed that it dries lighter. So that is something that you need to know about watercolors, is that they look a little bit more vibrant when wet. And then once they dry, they will dry slightly lighter. Okay, so here I go back in with my clean water. And as I'm doing this, are there any stamp sets that you would like to see featured if we decide to do another watercolor coloring book? Because it was tough to narrow down the designs to only 12 when we created this. And I think if people enjoy it and they would like to see another book at some point, we would love to get your feedback on any favorite Altenew sets that you think would make good coloring book pages. All right, I went really deep with this one. This one's a little more saturated on that petal. Thanks, Liz. She said she likes the warm colors that I'm going with. Although if I add purple, that's going to ruin the whole warm thing, but we'll see. Maybe I'll change my mind once I get there. I was trying to think before I did this live today, like, is there a way to just play some like classical music or something while I'm painting? Because that's what I would be doing if I wasn't presenting live right now. I definitely have some orchestral music playing just to keep things relaxing and soothing. But I couldn't really think of a good way to do that that you guys would be able to hear as well. I wouldn't want it to just be like strange background sounds. Okay, so I'm pretty much finished up because the other petal that would be on this flower would be tucked behind that rose. So I'm going to go in and just add a little bit more of this red here for this petal. And then we can make some choices for what we want the inner petals to do. Okay, let's just go with a different color, even though it might not be the most natural flower, or maybe even not the most beautiful, because I don't know exactly how it's going to look until I do it. But I do want to show you different possibilities. So I'm thinking we're going to go with a warmer toned purple. I do have over here, I'm not sure which colors I use to mix this, but I kind of like that it's a little bit muted. So I'm going to dip into that. See, that's the only negative or downside to reusing paints from a previous painting session. And let me show you what I'm doing here. I'm just picking it up with water. So this has been dried for probably about 2 weeks since I last used this palette. And it just reactivates easily with a little bit of water. So I'm just going to pick that up on my brush. And for these little petals, I'm just going to put some color towards the base. And then I'm going to go back with a brush that just has some water on it, and I'm going to use the brush to pull the color up. So that's another way that you can do your blending. So right there, I just applied that color. And now with a damp brush, oops, a little too much water once again. With a damp brush, I'm just going to pull that color around. Okay. So you can see that's another way to just get some color down. I think these petals would also be part of that same color. So I'll just go in and paint this like quickly, and then I'll go in and add a little bit of a deeper tone so that I can have a little bit more interest. But I'm just going to go around and do these all in a batch like that, and I'll go back and add more color. So Judith, I see you just said you didn't see the release, but you're on the live. So this is our new watercolor coloring book. And I did mention earlier that it's fun just to use to practice different techniques, but it's a 5x7 size. So when you're finished with your painting, you can either just leave it in the book, or you can pull it out and then either frame it with a 5x7 frame or trim it down to create an A2 size card. It's really up to you. Okay, so we just have some fun colors going on. And then in the center there, I think I'm going to go with a really dark color. something to really make it pop because I've got a lot of lightness happening. Let's go with purples still, but I think I'm going to pull some color directly from the palette. Okay, so when I'm doing this, I took my brush and I'm just going to activate right here on the pan itself. And I'm getting a lot of juicy color right here. And that is still using the same brush. We like that we have different brush sets because, of course, if you're doing a wash, you wouldn't use a brush like this. If you were doing larger petals, you wouldn't use a brush like this. But I like using the same brush. I don't know why. I feel like it gives me better workflow just to use one brush as I create. But we do have multiple brushes. So one of the sets has 4 brushes and the other set has 5 brushes. So there are 4 in the detail set and 5 in the other set. And I'm putting this color down strong just to show you how deep you can get the saturation. Now, again, this will dry down lighter. So we'll get to check up on it a little bit later to see how it looks when it's dried down. But I just wanted to have a really deep center to that to offset the other colors. So I'm using the 36 pan set. So this was the first pan set that we had released. Okay, you got the most lovely. There are colors all over the place, but that's just how I work. I don't my palette after I'm done working or after I'm painting. Okay, let's see if I can show you something different on one of the other flowers. So for this, I'm just going to go in easily with wet brush again. And for this one, I'm not going to go one petal at a time. Oops, probably would help if I clean that purple off first. But all right, so I'm just going to go over thing. I guess it's going to have a purple hue to it a little bit. And I'm going to get it real wet. And this time, I'm just going to drop in different colors. So this one's going to be less of a realistic look than this one. So this one had shading. This one's just going to be pretty watercolor colors. Okay, so it's got a purpley base. Let me add some blue to this. And I'm getting some paint on my brush. And then I'm just going to tap in different areas. Okay, just like this. And then we're just to dry. Okay, so that's going to end up being a purple and blue blend. It's a lot quicker of a way to add color. And then up here, let's do a more detailed thing. So this is going to just be a practice page. I feel like with different styles of paint and with different colors happening, I probably not end up putting this onto a card, and I wouldn't want to frame it, but we're going to try different techniques. Okay, so let's more realistic look, and this is going to require lots of layers. So I'm going to start similarly to what I did here, and I'm going to just one of my petals. Let's do maybe purpley fuchsia for this. I think that'll be nice. Okay, so I'm going to grab in some of right over here. I like that deep color. And I do want to focus that towards the bottom. And then I'm going to let that blend into this lighter pink towards the top. And I will move the camera down closer so you can see what's going on. And I'm excited to see how that one dries. Never know till it is dry. Okay. So I'm going to go into the pink and add some of that color. And this is just going to be my first layer. So I will go back and do more on top of that. So we'll go to the next petal right over here. And again, drop in those colors. Laurie said the watercolor, where did you get the watercolor book? So this is a new release today. If you go onto the Altenew store, you'll be able to see it as one of the linked products. We also have links to it on our blog. And it would have the link in the chat also. So if you wanted to just directly go there from where we are live, you can do that. Okay, so we'll let this one dry. And I'll continue around. Then once that first petal is dry, I'm going to want to add more detail, and I will grab a smaller detail brush to do that. And I'll start adding some texture with my brush because that's what's going to make it look more realistic and really make it come alive. I'll add my deep color here, my lighter color towards the tip. And again, just letting the water do the work. Okay, don't worry that there's not too much contrast now because that will come later. And here you can see this petal is folded. So what I'm going to do is put the darker color here and the lighter color here, just to get it started, just so I know I have a good base to work on. And since these areas are touching, I'm actually going to paint the other color, but leave a slight little edge where it is not painted, just so that it doesn't grab the light color into the darker color. Okay, so I'm just going to leave a little bit of a border that I can always fill in later. Right now, this is just getting some color. Okay, I can see this is still a little bit wet. So while we wait for it to dry, let's paint in some of the leaves with this like tie-dye look we have going on over here. I also wanted to add some color to the center of that one, and this is almost dry. I feel like someone just joining us now will be like, what kind of a crazy painting is this with 3 different styles of painting? This is just practicing, just showing some different techniques. So I'm going to get this nice limey green color and drop in some blue. Unexpected, but I think it would look nice. So just like I did before, just adding some little dots to tie into that tie-dye look. Okay, so hello to everyone else who just recently joined us. If you share while we're live, you'll have a $15 gift certificate to the Altenew store. And you can pick up some new goodies, including anything that I'm sharing with you today, which includes our new watercolor brush sets, as well as the watercolor coloring book that I am working on right now. Okay, and just dipping in some more of that blue. And I really love those 2 colors together. So you could just have fun and really just paint however you like. You can look up techniques, you can look up videos, or you can just, make up your own thing. There's really no right or wrong way of doing it. But practicing does help, because I feel like once you know the watercolor is going to react, you might not know exactly what it's going to do. It is unpredictable, but you will know approximately what it'll do. So knowing those things, experience with that, will help you as you paint and create. All right, so this one's dry, so let's add a little center to that. Maybe I'll go with some orange. I think that'll be kind of fun with the blues and purples, just some contrast again. So for this, going with wet paint directly on top of the dry paint, just because I wanted to really have a nice pop of color. So that's nice and bright center. And just like we did on the leaves, I'm going to dot in some darker tones. So I'll go with like a brownish color, just dot it in there. And since it's going onto the wet paint, it will blend. So if you ever want it to blend, you want to go with wet paint on a wet surface, and that'll blend automatically. If you want it to have a harsh edge, then you're going to want to paint onto a dry surface. So either just wait for the layer underneath to dry and then paint on top of it. So that's what I did here on that blue flower. All right, so let's recap what we have going on so far. We have the first one that I painted, and this one is an in-between technique, not too difficult, but it is a lovely way to blend colors. So I started by painting the petal with water and then dropping in color, and it just seamlessly blends. I also wanted to show you how deep that gets. Okay, so I used a lot of pigment, a lot of saturated paint on my brush to paint that. So it was super duper dark. Okay, and I wanted that contrast to the other petals. This one, I just dropped in color, wet it all, just dropped it, some purples and blues. So that was easy. And then this one, I'm going to add a little bit more detail to. It looks like my first petal is dry. So let's go in with number 1 brush. And I'm wet this first. I want these detail lines to be a little crisp. So what I said before is when you want something to not flow, right? You want to just be crisp, harsher lines. You want your paint to be on a dry surface. So I'm checking that, and it is indeed dry. And let's go into some really dark colors. So let me bring this over here. This is what I used before to paint those petals. And I'm just going to grab some other dark colors just to get a really deep tone. And I'm not worried if it picks up some of this green, because that'll just make the color a little bit darker and more intense. And I didn't need to mix a lot of that paint just because I'm working on such a small petal. And I know I'm not going to do a bunch of these. So I'm just going to pick up the paint like that. All right, now I can go in and I'm going to add little detail lines. Oh, I wish I could zoom you in more. I think it might be a little bit hard to see. So hopefully you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. And I'm just flicking up from the center and making these little lines. And what's happening is it's adding veining to that leaf or that petal. My goodness, it looks like it's not coming in very clearly. I am so sorry. I'm going to grab some more dark color. And now again, going in and adding that towards the base. Now, petals aren't just dark at the base and light at the edges. There are some shadows that might come through. So I'm going to go in and flick from the top of the petal as well. And this flicking technique reminds me of how people use our artist markers. Okay, so you can use some of the same flicking motions, just coming from the top and pulling it down. Okay, so now I have a little bit more life in this petal than I did before. And I feel like I'm missing out on some of the vibrant fuchsia. So I'm going to go back and add some of that too. I just need to be careful because what I just painted is still slightly wet. So I don't want to make things muddy, but I do just want to bring a little bit of vibrance back to this petal. I'm just making tiny little strokes, just like that. I really wish you could see. I think when I flip over at the end of our live session today, I'll just show you on the larger camera because I think it's a little bit more clear. And this one is almost dry. I'll start working on this bottom petal because that one looks like it is ready to be painted. And once again, I want to have some of those veining lines coming up from the bottom. And these brushes have such a fine little tip on them, that point. And this is the number 1 brush, and that point is so detailed. Connie's asking what kind of brush is that? This is from the new Altenew watercolor brush set that has been released. And we have 2 different sets. So the one I'm using right now is from the fine detail brushes. Okay, so that comes with 4 brushes. And then the other set that we have includes 5 brushes. I did pull one out, so you only see 4 here. The other one I pulled out on my desk. But these are lovely synthetic brushes, and they're really a joy to work with. And as I mentioned before, I just love how they look. Maybe it's because we put so much time and effort in behind the scenes to design them, but I think they really came out nice. Okay, so I'm just putting in these little details. That one's still wet, so I'm just going to leave it. That one's still wet. I told you we weren't going to finish anything today, but we're just going to have some fun painting. Okay, so let me flip you back, and I'll give you a better view, because like I said, I think the front camera is a little bit clearer. There we go. And I'll kind of wrap things up. If you haven't shared yet, please share soon. Because when I sign off, you will no longer be eligible to win that $15 gift certificate. So today, let's wrap it up. Today, we have new things for watercolor lovers, including the watercolor book that I was just working in, and then the watercolor paint brushes. And they really go well with our other watercolor mediums, including the 36 pan set that I was just using. We also have the 24 artist watercolor set, our watercolor brush markers. We have also watercolor pencils, woodless watercolor pencils, and we have our metallic watercolor set. You can also use the watercolor brush marker refills and use them with these brushes, okay? And this is my crazy creation from today. And I'm calling it crazy because I tried many different techniques and I used lots of different colors just to show you different things that you can do. So I'll start with the simplest, and that was this one right here, that purple and blue. So I had a wet brush and it had a little bit of purple pigment on it from when I painted this one. So it has a little slight purpley tint. And when it was still wet, I just dropped in some blue paint, just like little dots. If I had more water, you wouldn't see those little dot areas. Okay, they'd be a little more blended, but because of the amount of water that I had, I ended up just getting a slight blend and a little bit of a diffusing of the color. And I did the same thing here on these leaves. When that was dry, I added in some color in the center. This one was the medium technique. So for that, I painted each petal just with water. And then I put in some color towards the base and some color towards the tip. And then I just let the water do its thing to blend them together. And then in the center, I wanted to show you how you could like really get a deep saturated color by loading up the brush. So the brush is going to hold a lot of water. It's going to hold a lot of paint. So you just keep going at it in the pan and it's going to pick up a lot of color. And then that's how you can get a super intense look. Watercoloring is usually light and airy, so you don't want to do too much of that intense color. I think you'd end up with like a heavy, dark painting. But for little areas, I think that's perfect just to bring attention. Like I wanted some contrast because my leaves, or keep calling leaves, my petals were so light that I wanted to have some intensity in the center. And then the last one, can you even see what I worked on? This is the petal that I'm pretty much almost completed on. I have a little more I would add to it, but I started off like that second technique, like this one down here, but I went back once it was dry and I'm adding more details. So I'm adding fine lines, and that's where you really get to use these tiny fine liner brushes. It's really fantastic to have a lot of control and making little tiny strokes. And that's just going to add a lot of texture to your painting, but make sure that you're painting on a dry surface, because if you're painting with those fine details onto a petal that's still wet, it's just going to take the color, blend it out, and you're not going to get that definition. So you want to make sure you're kind of hopping around in different areas of your painting, waiting for one petal to dry while you work on a different one. The thing that we didn't do today, but unfortunately we ran out of time, is I wanted to use that big chunky brush and make a watercolor wash on one of the other pages. But it is easy to do. Again, lots of water, add your paint and just go at it. You can drop in other colors and then just let it dry. Leave it alone and the colors are going to blend. They're going to do their thing, okay? Now, if you joined us late, I just quickly want to show you the next page because it might not be something you're expecting. It is the same design, but printed in gray. And that way you can get a no line watercolor look. So if the no line watercolor look is your thing, I would definitely go with the second technique or the third technique. Sorry, I'm not getting the opposite. Like, it's not a mirror. It's going the opposite way. Sorry, my pointing is terrible today. All right, but I would use something like this mostly because that'll give you a lot of variation and a lot of contrast, which is what you want when you're doing no line. If you do something like this, it's just going to blend together and you're not going to get any definition, because without the black lines there, everything's just kind of going to mix together. So you really want to have some contrast in your paint since you don't have contrast in the lines. I talked a lot today. I'm sorry. I hope you learned something. We don't have a finished project, but I'm excited to keep playing around with different techniques, maybe try something new that I haven't tried before. And if you haven't checked out our blog hop, go do that. Oh, everybody did such a great job, and everyone's is so different. They use the same watercolor coloring book. They use some of the same pages. We've got the 12 designs, each in 2 different shades, the black and the gray, and they use them in different ways. So a lot of different looks from the same products. Ooh, that was a mouthful today, but I had fun with you guys as always, and I hope you have a fantastic and crafty day. Bye, everybody.